The warmth did nothing to soothe the chill creeping up my spine. The bed beside me was cold, the sheets slightly ruffled. Brandon was gone. I pulled on my robe and shuffled into the kitchen, feeling a strange sense of detachment. Something told me I already knew what I would find, and there it was, pinned to the fridge like a taunt, his parting gift. Goodbye, never loved you anyway. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. Real classy, Brandon. Some women might have fallen to the floor in heartbreak, but me? I just grabbed a cup of coffee and sat down at my desk. This was no surprise. I'd seen it coming for months. My name is EA Thompson, and I'm a forensic accountant in Milwaukee. For the past 15 years, I've tracked financial fraud across the Midwest. It's my job to uncover hidden money, shady transactions, and patterns of deceit. And my soon-to-be ex-husband had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Chapter 2, The Red Flags. Brandon had always been charming. We met at a charity gala 6 years ago, and he had the confidence of a man who had everything under control. An investment advisor with a silver tongue, he made me feel like the only woman in the room. For a while, our life seemed perfect. We bought a beautiful house, traveled, and built what I thought was a strong foundation, but the cracks had been there all along. I had just chosen to ignore them. Looking back, the red flags were obvious. He never talked about his past in detail. His career was vague at best. Whenever I asked about his clients, he would deflect. He became defensive about money, even though I handled our finances. He started disappearing for business trips that didn't align with any known conferences. Last Christmas, he insisted on separate bank accounts for holiday spending. Then there was the jewelry. High-end purchases from luxury brands. Not one of those sparkling trinkets ever made its way into my hands. Brandon thought he was clever, but money leaves a trail. Chapter 3, The Investigation. Most wives might have confronted their husbands the moment they suspected something was wrong, but I'm not most wives. Instead, I did what I do best, I gathered evidence. For 3 months, I tracked his every move, every purchase he made, every call that came from unknown numbers. Every attempt to quietly move our money without my noticing. What he didn't realize was that I saw it all. By the time he left that ridiculous note, thinking he had pulled off the perfect escape, I had already moved our savings, frozen our accounts, and set up alerts on all our financial transactions. So when my phone buzzed that Monday morning with fraud alerts, I couldn't help but smile. Chapter 4, The Phone Call. I was sipping my second cup of coffee when my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but I answered anyway. What do you mean my account is overdrawn? A woman screeched on the other end. I recognized the voice immediately, Brandon's so-called sister, Kelly. That's impossible, I said smoothly, feigning confusion. What happened? Brandon promised me rent money, he said he'd take care of it, and now my account is empty. I let a pause stretch between us, then whispered, he did what? I wanted her to think I was just as blindsided as she was. In reality, I knew exactly what had happened. Kelly wasn't his sister, she was an accomplice, and she had just confirmed what I suspected. Brandon wasn't just planning to leave me. He was running from something much bigger. Chapter 5, The Realization. 3 weeks ago, my colleague Susan had rushed into my office, her face pale, her phone gripped tightly in her hand. Isla, you need to see this. I frowned and leaned over her desk. On her screen was a list of flagged transactions from an ongoing investigation, a fraud case spanning multiple states, with dozens of victims, and right there, among the suspects, was a name that made my stomach drop. Brandon Thompson. Not as a witness. Not as a victim. But as a person of interest. The same patterns I had been tracking in our personal accounts were appearing in his professional life. He wasn't just a lying husband. He was a criminal. Chapter 6, The Trap. Brandon had spent months thinking he was manipulating me, playing me for a fool while he set up his escape, but what he never realized was that every step he took, I was 2 steps ahead. I had already reported the fraud alerts to the FBI. I had documented every financial move he made. I had even coordinated with his next target, Caroline Mitchell, a hedge fund manager he had been wooing, who had agreed to help us bring him down. The trap was set. And Brandon was walking straight into it. Chapter 7, Checkmate. I stood outside the coffee shop, watching through the window as 2 federal agents placed Brandon in handcuffs. His face was pale, his confidence gone. He had no idea what hit him. How many victims? I asked Susan, already knowing the answer would be ugly. 23 so far, spanning 5 states, 12 marriages, all to successful women in finance. But here's the kicker, he was planning something bigger. Bigger? Susan nodded. He was setting up a fraudulent investment firm, using your credentials and reputation to lure in high-net-worth clients. If you hadn't caught him, he could have scammed millions. The irony was almost laughable. If he had stuck to his usual con, he might have gotten away again, but he got greedy. I thought about all those nights when he had pretended to be interested in my work. He wasn't being supportive, he was gathering intel. Too bad for him, I had always been a step ahead. As they loaded him into the car, my phone buzzed with a new message. You think you're clever, but you have no idea what's coming. Check your email. I opened the attachment. Chilling images filled the screen, photos of me, my family, my home. Someone had been watching me. The game wasn't over yet, but one thing was certain, Brandon had made a fatal miscalculation. He underestimated me. And that was his biggest mistake of all. The trap. I sat in the coffee shop, stirring my drink absent-mindedly, my eyes fixed on the window. Outside, a swarm of federal agents surrounded a sleek black vehicle. The man they were escorting inside looked nothing like the confident, charismatic figure I had once known. Now, he seemed small, defeated. Brandon Thompson, or rather, whatever his real name was, had finally been caught. Susan, the lead investigator on the case, took a seat across from me, setting a thick folder on the table. She exhaled sharply. It's worse than we thought, she said. I wasn't surprised. How many victims? I asked, already bracing for an ugly answer. Susan flipped open the folder. 23 confirmed, 5 states, 12 marriages, all to successful women in finance. But here's the kicker, he was planning something bigger. We found evidence of a new investment firm he was setting up. He was going to use your credentials and reputation to lure in high-net-worth clients. A wave of nausea rolled over me. I thought about all those late nights when he had shown interest in my work, asked about my cases. At the time, I had believed he was being supportive. Now, I knew better. He had been gathering information, carefully planning his next big con. The irony, I muttered, staring at my untouched coffee, is that if he hadn't gotten greedy, if he had just stuck to his usual marriage scam, he might have slipped away again, but he had to go bigger. Susan smirked. And that's not even the best part. Remember that country club membership he insisted on last year? I nodded. He had claimed it was for networking, a way to expand our social circles. Turns out, Susan continued, he was using it to meet his next target, Caroline Mitchell, the hedge fund manager. I stiffened. Caroline Mitchell wasn't just any hedge fund manager. She was one of my closest friends. Brandon was already laying the groundwork for his next disappearing act, Susan said, only this time, Caroline was onto him. She worked with us, documented everything, every email, every text, every conversation they had at the club, all recorded. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head in disbelief. So he wrote our case for us. Susan grinned, pretty much. The accomplice. Something still nagged at me. Have you heard from his sister, Kelly? She called me this morning, sounded frantic. Susan leaned back. That's another twist. She's not his sister at all. I blinked. What? She's his accomplice, Susan explained. They've been running this scam together for years. She plays the desperate sister, explains why he suddenly needs money right before he vanishes. I exhaled slowly. Where is she now? Chicago, Susan said, being picked up as we speak. The threat. Just as I was about to leave the coffee shop, my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You think you're clever, but you have no idea what's coming. Check your email. I immediately opened my inbox. Attached were photos, pictures of me, my family, my home, even shots taken through my windows. A slow, burning anger replaced my initial chill. Brandon had hired someone to watch me. I forwarded everything to Susan and my lawyer, then dialed the FBI agent in charge. Agent Morrison, I said, we've got another player in the game. She answered quickly, we're already on it. The photos were sent from an IP address linked to James Foster. Name ring a bell? No. Brandon's former cellmate from a brief stint in Phoenix. He's been working as Brandon's muscle, threatening victims who get too close to exposing the scheme. My stomach turned. Where is he now? Agent Morrison paused. That's the problem. We can't locate him. Then she cursed. Wait, there's movement on one of Brandon's frozen accounts. Someone is trying to access it. From where? A long silence. Then, from inside your house. The final move. My breath hitched. My house, where I had left my laptop open. I called Rachel, my friend staying at my place. She picked up on the first ring. Is everything okay there? I asked. Rachel hesitated. We have a situation. What kind of situation? Kelly's here. My heart slammed against my ribs. She's supposed to be in custody. She must have had a key, Rachel whispered. She's trying to access Brandon's accounts on your computer. My pulse roared in my ears. Rachel, get out of there now. Kelly's not alone. A crash, a sharp intake of breath. Then Rachel's voice, low but steady. Too late, Foster's here too. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to think clearly. Rachel, remember what we talked about. It's time. A pause, then her voice, smooth as silk. Hey, Kelly, Rachel said, before you do anything stupid, you might want to look at the screen. I smiled. I knew exactly what Kelly was seeing. Every file, every login attempt, every keystroke was being live-streamed to the FBI. Then came the sirens. Within minutes, agents swarmed my house. Kelly and Foster were in custody. The endgame. I arrived home to find Agent Morrison waiting. Quite a performance, she said. I shrugged. People like Brandon, Kelly, and Foster always get desperate at the end. They think they're in control, until they aren't. She smiled. Well, with these new charges, Brandon will never scam anyone again. I glanced toward my house. My home had become a crime scene, but at least it was over. Almost. Because I had a feeling Brandon wasn't done just yet.